Bonjour tout le monde. We'd like to welcome you to our presentation today, Traveling with Pets, featuring Hilary Strong. We'll go through the presentation this morning, and if you have anything you'd like to comment during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat box. And at the end of today's presentation, Hilary will be taking any of your questions, and you'll have an opportunity to speak with her.
My name's Hilary Strong. I'm a certified dog behavior consultant and dog trainer, and I'm a licensed family pause parent educator. And before I came to Belgium, which is where I am now, I was a veterinary assistant for 5 years. So I'm actually more behaviorally qualified with dogs, but of course I have that professional experience with cats too. So what I'll try to do too is touch upon dogs and cats. I realize that people might have other pets out can. So certainly let me know if you do, if you're in that unique situation, or if you're watching the recording, you can always ask afterwards. And if you have any specific questions relating to that, but I'm going to focus mostly on dogs and cats. Prepping for travel, we're going to start with that. So say, you want to go to another country with your animal, in Europe, maybe you want to go to the UK, I'm going to use some European examples, but at the end, let me know if you're posted somewhere else and, you have any specific questions to wherever you're staying. I'll try to talk in a more general way, but I know with my experience too, with, Europe, I'm probably going to use a lot of those examples. So yeah, say you want to go somewhere with your pet. You want to make sure they're healthy for travel. That kind of sounds like a given, but there's so many aspects to that. And health isn't just about physical health. It's about mental health and resilience as well. So is it something that your animal can handle? But the first thing you're going to want to do is go to your veterinarian, and really that should be one of the first steps when you move somewhere out can with your animal. Is find a veterinarian that you're comfortable with and happy with. I know in Europe, they have, you'll see on my screen here, they have little pet passports that your vet can fill out for you and get started. You can put your pet's picture in there if you want, super cute. But that's where they're gonna write down your pet's vaccinations, which they already should have sort of core vaccinations for moving to whatever specific country you're moving to, and they may have their specific regulations as well. So your pet passport. There's some additional requirements as well. So for example, we're in Belgium, going to the UK, they have their additional regulations that they have that some other European countries don't have would be making sure that your animal gets a specific dewormer. So I think it's tapeworm, and they should get that a few days before traveling, and that would be written in your pet passport. So when you cross the border, they'll have this pet check-in station, and they'll check that to make sure that's all taken care of. Microchip as well. I'm pretty sure that's moving to a lot of countries, it's mandatory anyway that your pet should have a microchip. So if you're moving out can already and you're there with your pet, they probably should already have a microchip, but make sure you have all their info written down, their microchip number and everything. Medications, especially I'm used to traveling with a senior dog, so medications were a big aspect to our travel and his medication schedule. You probably saw the cute black dog in the first picture. That was our dog Bubs. He passed away at 13 not long ago, but we got to do a lot of traveling with him, and he was an amazing dog. So yeah, medications, having that medication schedule. Muzzles, we'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm kind of talking about dogs right now because that's more of a dog specific thing, but we'll talk about kitty things as well. Muzzles, especially with what goes on, for example, in the UK, and there's some other countries. I'd like to know, other people, if you have any specific situations where you've been to countries and maybe you have a unique breed, a type of bully breed, or, you know, for example, like pit bull breeds, there's a lot of breed bans and breed specific legislation, unfortunately, in different countries and even different villages. So if you're going to go anywhere and you have one of those kinds of breeds that sadly can be labeled as dangerous dogs, you want to do some research on that first before you go. So accommodations, of course, you know, where are you going to stay? Are you going to stay with friends or family? Are you going to stay at a hotel? Are you going to stay in an Airbnb? There are apps. Bring Fido can be a helpful app where it can tell you all of like the pet friendly places you can go depending on what city you're going to. There's also the Park for Night app, which that one caught my eye because if you're the type where your main source of transportation is like if you have a camper van or something like that, and you kind of like to do that kind of nomad stuff, the Park for Night app can tell you places that you can park for free, which is really cool. And I included Sniff Spot there. I think right now it only exists like in the States and a little bit in Canada, but Sniff Spot is kind of cool. You wouldn't think you need something like this, but some people, especially if they have like reactive dogs, or if they have an animal that just needs to get out and move some quiet time without worrying about other animals and things like that. Sniff Spot is actually, you can rent like a private like lot or like someone's yard where, you know, by the hour, and you can go and take them to sniff. So it's just a good option to have depending on where you are. And then of course, you know, kind of obvious also, but your packing checklist: food, water bottle, medication, a Kong for stuffing, treats, blankets, their bed, poop bags. For a kitty, you know, I know people who travel like in their van with kitties. So, you know, maybe cat litter, first aid kit. If you're traveling, like if you're driving with your dog, a doggy seatbelt can be super important. Crate training, we'll talk more about that. So that's one of the best ways to keep your animals safe in the car rather than moving around loose. But if you're taking like a train or a plane, and we'll touch on that, they're going to have to go in some form of a crate or a carrier. And walking equipment, secure walking equipment, like a harness that fits properly. Sometimes, like if you have an animal that's known to like back out of a harness, doing kind of like a double equipment system where you got like a harness and a collar, and you can attach both of them at the same time, and then the leash. So if they slip out of one, you've got the other one as backup. All right. So planes, trains, and automobiles. So how are you going to get there? And that really all depends on your unique animal, you know, their size, their species, their age, resilience levels, breed. I mean, even flying in planes, breed is a factor. You want to be careful with brachycephalic animals, so animals with like flat noses, so like Persian cats, boxers, pugs. A lot of airlines now won't even allow them because there is a potential for breathing issues on a plane, which is understandable, but it can make it tricky for travel. So if you are, say, living in a place like Europe and you want to bounce from country to country, your best option might be to drive or take some other mode of transportation. If you do take a plane, you know, they do often have higher restrictions anyway. You're more likely only able to take smaller pets who can like fit under your seat. If not, they would go into the cargo hold. So, you know, I want to hear everyone's unique stories afterwards, depending on the time. So someone else might have a unique example of traveling in a plane with an animal, and some airlines are a little more laid back than others. So trains are kind of similar to planes in that depending on which train you're taking, depends on, you know, what animals they'll allow and what size. Usually they prefer smaller animals. And then of course, they're always going to say well-behaved animals only. So sometimes it's situation specific. In places like Europe, trains, like Eurostar. The Eurostar train allows some animals, but like within, like between cities, they're a lot pickier and you may not be able to bring an animal on there at all. And then if you are going to bring your personal vehicle, are you going to rent? So you don't, necessarily have to clean the car after. With our dog Bubs, you'll see him there in his little buggy. His mobility started to slow down after a while. So we got him a little push buggy, not because he was a prince, but because, maybe a little bit, but because it made it easier if we wanted to go on long walks or travel in cities where we're going to do a lot of walking. We'd bring that in the back of the car with us. But it was easiest to bring him in our own vehicle, and he settled quite nicely in the car. But I know people who rent camper vans, some people who've even bought their own camper vans, like, they're hippie vans. And they take their animals along with them for the ride. There's some other considerations with kitties, cats, it's easier for them to escape if they wanted to. You want to make sure you have, a really sociable cat. And you really, like with any dog you do, but with a cat, you want to make sure they got a nice secure harness there. So there's other unique aspects to bringing a cat with you, using the bathroom and things like that. So a cat, you're going to want to start at a very young age if that's something you want to do. If you're going to stay with friends or family, making sure, I guess that's the next slide. So I'll start that. We'll talk about safety and just what you want to consider with cats and dogs. So yeah, safety. IDs, so we talked about microchip, but make sure that you have good identification on your animal. So a tag on their collar with your current phone number, even collar and harness if they're wearing a harness. I'm a big fan of harnesses because they're more comfortable than walking them with just their collar and their neck, and they're a lot more safe. With our dog, we had our contact information just right in the little pocket in his harness, and you can wear the collar there as well with ID. Extreme temperatures is another important thing to consider. If you're going to a place like Italy and you've got a dog with a big thick coat, or a dog or a cat with like a flatter face, they're more prone to overheating. So you want to keep that in mind. What time of year are you going to go? You want to consider their safety for that reason. Situational awareness. So where are you going? How close is it to a busy road? Is it close next to a house that maybe has a not so friendly dog with predatory instincts? You want to, if your cat were to get out, or if you have a small dog, say you're staying with friends, you want to make sure that, are there any risks next door? I guess I think about that where, that's an issue anywhere, even in Canada, but you want to be aware of off-leash dogs and things like that. And what would you do in a situation where your animal was in a vulnerable situation, where there was an off-leash animal that you didn't know if you could trust them? How much walking is involved? Is a lot of walking something your animal can handle? With cats, even with cats that you train to wear a harness and be comfortable with harness on leash, generally that's more for security. And usually when you travel with a cat, it's easier to bring them in a carrier or a little backpack. I'll show you some cute pictures later of some examples of traveling with your cat. With our dog Bubs, he started to have a lot of back end knee issues later on. So we really had to plan our trip around whether he could walk from point A to point B. And then eventually we did get that little buggy for him off Amazon so that we could push him around when he needed a break. And sometimes we kind of had to enforce breaks for him because, he wanted to go. So that's if, you're really, really crazy animal people like we are. And we took him everywhere because he was kind of a part of us. So, excuse me. So we talked about equipment, making sure everything's secure, comfortable. Be aware of if your animal's wearing a collar harness with plastic fastens that like a really strong dog could break out of one of those. So like the metal fastening or clips on a harness or collar are best. When you plan to go to a new place, look up where the local veterinarians are in that area, so that if an emergency were to pop up, make sure that you know who to contact and like how long it would take you to get there, because things happen, unfortunately. And then, yeah, crates and seatbelts, making sure that they're safe when they're in transit. And keeping food and medications in a cool, secure place, and also making sure you have enough food and medications in case you are going to, I don't know about necessarily a remote place, but a place that doesn't, you know, have pet stores or veterinarians super close by. Environmental hazards. We kind of had less, I know with our dog, we had less of a concern of him eating things, you know, some dogs can be gross. You don't see that as much with cats, but with dogs, sometimes they like to eat stuff off the ground. And you want to teach them early, at an early age, to not do that. But I know in Canada, we had less of a concern with that. And then when we moved to Belgium, you know, there would be a lot more dog poo around in our area, and like litter and things like that. And then maybe plants or mushrooms you're not familiar with. That's something to be really aware of, to make sure that your animal's not consuming anything that could be dangerous to them. Apologies if I'm talking a little bit fast. I can get a little bit chatty. So let me know, you know, if I need to slow down or anything. Okay, so I couldn't do really any presentation on animals without talking about aspects of training, but mainly behavior tips. Because what I specialize is really animal well-being. When I'm working with dogs, like, yes, I do training, but I'm more of a behavior consultant than a trainer. I want to make sure that, you know, your dog is feeling mentally well, because an animal that's feeling stressed out is not behaving at their best. An animal that's, you know, doesn't have good mental health isn't going to, they're training them is not really going to be as easy. So you really don't have to have the most perfectly obedient animal to travel places. But you want an animal who's sociable. And honestly, there's less of those than you would think, especially since the pandemic and since a lot of animals became under-socialized. Let me know if any of you relate to this, but there's a lot less socialization going on during the pandemic and lockdown. So it's actually more common than not now to meet an animal that is skittish, nervous, reactive, aggressive around strangers. So you really do, you know, traveling, your life is going to be really hard if your animal gets freaked out and reactive and aggressive when they see people and other animals. Because chances are when you're traveling places, you're going to see people and other animals, and especially in Europe. Excuse me, my throat's really dry. There's people all around. It's like there's not as much open space as there is in Canada. All right, I'll try to take a breath. So I'm going to show you some examples of some training skills that you can teach that can make your life a little bit easier. But like I said, it's not about perfect obedience, but having a few of these life-saving skills can make a huge difference for you. So I will show you a little example of muzzle conditioning. If you have no choice, you need to muzzle train your animal, your dog. Usually it's dogs that wear muzzles. Even good dogs wear muzzles. So sometimes it's just a good tool to have in your back pocket. And crate training for dogs and cats. Settling on a mat can be really, really handy skill for both animals. For dogs, it's more common in Europe to take them to, like, it's more accepted, socially accepted, take them to restaurants, and that's something we've done, and it's a really cool, unique experience. So teaching your dog to settle in place, like in one of the past pictures, there was Bubs in a pub and he was just hanging out. He was blocking the room to the front door, I will add, but he was very calm and happy while we just hung out and we, you know, sipped our beers. So very useful skill. leave it. So yeah, like I said before, to avoid dangerous substances on the ground, or so that your animal's not like begging or trying to steal, fries off the table, things like that. The ability to ignore other animals and comfortable around crowds. And there's a difference between like a really obedient animal that will ignore things out of, I guess, because you told them to and made them to, but you really want to make sure they're comfortable doing it. So there's a difference between, obedience behaviors and behaviors that the animal will naturally do because they were socialized to do it and they feel safe. You don't have to pressure. This is a huge thing. And this is not just traveling with your animal out camp. This is in any situation. You don't have to pressure your animal to say hi to strangers. Like your animal's going to get a lot of attention. People are going to think they're adorable. But it is really important to be your animal's advocate because they can be exhibiting body language saying they're not comfortable with, a certain situation. And if we ignore that body language, those warning signals, then you could have problems later on. So I always recommend when you're out and about with your animal traveling, they don't need to say hi to every stranger, and they probably don't want to say hi to every stranger unless, it's a really goofy, happy-go-lucky lab on the rare occasion. So now we're going to talk about body language so that you can recognize those signs when your animal is uncomfortable. This should be a skill that you should have and you should build over time if you have a dog or a cat, because it's going to make your life and their life so much easier, because our animals are saying so much in their body language and we don't see it. And then, like I said, problems can happen later in life because we're not identifying those signs of stress. And then they can start to resort to worse behaviors later on. So we're all familiar with things like growling, when a dog and a cat growls when they're angry, barking, hissing. But there are all these other signs leading up. So let's talk about dogs. Some signs of stress. I'm just going to read them off quickly now. And then what we're going to do, we're just going to look at a couple examples of training skills. And then we're going to do a little bit of a body language 101 lesson using pictures. So with dogs, you can see whale eye when they're stressed. So whale eye is like the whites of their eyes showing, or like their eyes are really darting to the side. Pupils are dilated. You can see a yawn out of context. So they're not actually tired, but it's more of a displacement behavior. Like, I'm uncomfortable with this situation, so they yawn. A tongue flick, so mouth tight and shut, and that tongue flicks kind of like a lizard. Itching out of context, so they're not really itchy because they have fleas or a skin issue, but it can be another sign of discomfort if they're itching excessively. A stiff body, so like a super straight spine, not a loose wiggly body. Panting, tight mouth, lips drawn back. A paw lift, a tucked tail, a lot of us know that one. Hiding or cowering, a lot of us know that one too. Drooling is a huge sign of stress if they're not feeling nauseous. Fawning, so like being like overly submissive, or like, oh, please don't hurt me, I'm trying to be a good dog. Hyperactivity, so you have your fight, flight, freeze, but another one is fool around. So if your animal's acting like abnormally hyper and just like too silly, that can be a sign of stress. Hypervigilance, lowered body, stiff or erect tail. So tail wag isn't always a good thing. If it's up and really stiff, it could mean high alert, and that stress is starting to build up. Raised hair on the back, some people call that the mohawk. The technical term is piloerection. Pinned ears, wrinkled brow, bared teeth, whining, growling, snarl, snap and bite. Oops, sorry about that. So the growling, snarl, snap, and bite are the ones we all know. With cats, there's a lot of similarities. Really looking at that body posture with any animal is so important. So cats, they can get that stiff body, cowering, low body posture, hiding, freezing, like not exploring their environment. A tail thumper, swish. So like, I don't know if you noticed, but like people who don't know cats very well sometimes will be like, oh, the cat's wagging his tail, because they think it's like a dog and they think that's a good thing. But usually an annoyed cat will start to swish their tail a little bit, you know, when you've been petting them too long, maybe. Vocalization, inappropriate urination can be another sign of stress, you know, like peeing on your bed or your laundry basket, things like that. Clawing, scratching, of course. Panting, that's one with dogs as well. Pinned ears, dilated pupils, huffing. Swatting, fleeing, puffed tail, raised hair on the back, food refusal. Another one with a dog. A stressed animal is less likely to eat. So there's a lot more of these, and also context is really important, right? You really want to look at the whole context, the whole picture of what's going on with the animal. Okay, so this is a video of myself, both of my dogs who have passed since passed. So my dog Taz is the boxer mastiff there, and then there's Mr. Bubs, the black one. So we're doing some muzzle conditioning here. And what I'm using is, the brand is called the Baskerville Ultra Muzzle. And I'm just training them to be comfortable and to know that a muzzle doesn't mean they're a bad dog. It doesn't mean something bad is going to happen. I want it to be like a game for them. And this is just a skill I would have, not so much for Bubs, but Bubs just wanted to be included in everything. So I was doing the exercise with both of them. But my boxer mastiff Taz was quite people reactive. So I just had the muzzle in hand. So when we went places, and to be fair, I never would purposefully put him in situations where he would want to bite someone, and that's really how it should be. But there are other situations where you never know, you can't escape the situation, you have that on board. And I never really did have to use it for him that I can remember. But yeah, super great skill. And you know, there's a lot of people out there who have like the friendliest dogs in the world, but if they have to take them to the vet, it's like Cujo. So you might have one of those dogs, and you know, if you're traveling and an emergency happens and you have to take them to the vet, you have that skill. And again, there's the breed specific legislation as well, which, you know, is also in parts of Canada. So this can be useful for if you are living in Canada or moving back to Canada, you have this tool in your back pocket. But we train this using positive reinforcement, positive associations. You can start with peanut butter at the end of the muzzle, slow, gradual exposures, and then you can kind of teach the dog to nose target the muzzle on their own. And they learn when they do that, they get the best treats ever. And then what you do is you gradually extend the amount of time they have the muzzle on their face. And then you can gradually reduce the amount of food they get when they wear the muzzle. But essentially, muzzle equals big treat party. It's one of my favorite things to teach. It's just so fun. Okay, and the leave it cue. So this is one of my students in one of my adolescent puppy classes. So this is a lab, of course. And if you know labs, they absolutely love food. Geez, I've got the sun kind of shining in my eyes, so bear with me. I did plan that out. It's going to blind me a little bit while I'm talking. So with teaching the leave it, it's really easy to start teaching. We're using a clicker here, which is essentially a marker to tell the dog what you did in that exact second is what I want, and then a reward is coming. And you can start by teaching with food, using a very basic food, maybe not the most delicious food in the world to your dog. And you would start by, you'll see here, my students holding the treat in front of him. And then when he chooses to move away, she marks that, good dog, and then she rewards him. The video might be a little delayed where you are, so just, I'll slow down a little bit and just replay it a couple times. But in, you know, starting out, the dog may try to go for the food. So you'll want to close your hand at first and wait until he kind of stops trying to lick at your hand. And when he moves away, you can reward him for that behavior. And then eventually what you do is you start to increase the level of reinforcement, or like the value of the treat, sorry. So you can start using more valuable food like hot dog or placing things in different locations, like on your kitchen table, but you want to start easy with a low value treat to start. And then you reward for that immediate moving away. And then eventually you would add the verbal cue, like leave it. And so, but it takes some generalizing and a bit of practice in different locations. So let me know at the end if you have any questions regarding that. I could probably do a whole talk on teaching some of these behaviors as well, but some dogs pick up on stuff like this quite quickly. Okay, and so crate training. Crate training is really fun. I guess this would be like a soft cat carrier. So this is my cat Finn, and he is basically like a dog, and he loves to do any kind of training that I do with the dogs. He wants to be included, and I usually use like little temptation treats with him, or he also really loves shrimp, and I'll cut shrimp into little tiny pieces. With cats too, when you do training with them, you can get these little like squeeze tube treats for cats, where basically I think they sell them at pet stores, and veterinarians use them too, but you would squeeze the little tube and they would lick like kind of the soft food off the end. So I'm using a clicker here as well, and you don't have to use a clicker. You can use a marker where like, yes, good kitty. Essentially I just mark whenever he does the thing I like, and I build duration. And really how I started this was, if you investigate the carrier, you get some treats. And then if you spend a longer amount of time in the carrier, so I'd wait a couple seconds and then I would mark and treat. And then I'd wait a little longer for him to stay in the carrier. I'd mark and treat. You'll see I'm playing with the zippers. I want him to get comfortable with the sound of the zippers and them opening and closing. So that eventually I'd introduce those and I'd reward him. As you can see, I'm rewarding the spectators as well. They are supervising calmly. And then I would introduce movement. So actually picking up Finn and, walking around with the carrier so that he can get used to that movement as well. Because that's often what really freaks out kitties. And actually what I would do with him, I'd start out with the treats, and then we would end the session with a big catnip, essentially a catnip bath in the carrier. But just keep in mind that different cats react to catnip differently. Some of them, it can make them calmer, and others, it can overstimulate them. So just be mindful of that if you are using any catnip in some kind of like training activity like that. And you can actually see too, Bubs is demonstrating his mat training. So Bubs is actually on my yoga mat. I think it just happened to be on the floor, but he knows that a mat means to lie down, because we created that association. When you lie on your mat, you get big rewards. And then over time, we could just I could reward him intermittently, and he just does it anyway. So that worked out well as kind of a double example. Okay, so body language. I figured we'd do a little exercise where we can observe body language together of cats and dogs. So I thought I would start, pictures can say 1,000 words, and it's best to start by learning from pictures. They are just a snapshot, and context is important, but it's a really good way to, study all the finer details. So let's observe together. If you have any questions about the body language after, definitely let me know. I thought we would start with an example of a relaxed dog and a relaxed cat. So again, there's my dog Bubs. I apologize. I'm using him a lot in the slideshow, but I'd imagine you would probably do the same. So Bubs is here. So how can you tell he's relaxed here? You may not know Bubs personally, but you know that a relaxed dog, their ears are probably going to be like neutral or slightly forward. So just those relaxed floppy ears. The forehead. So the arrow on his forehead there, you can see his brow is smooth and relaxed, and his mouth is open. Relaxed dogs, often their mouth is open, minus the dogs that are like stress panting. And there's a totally different open mouth look to that. Usually their lips are pulled back far and they're drooling and they just don't look very happy. Now we're focusing on the faces because they say to look at an animal's tail, but really you want to start at the nose. The tail is probably one of the last things you want to look at to see how relaxed your animal is. And again, you want to know these skills so that you can advocate for your animal. So if you're traveling somewhere and your animal's showing signs of stress, you want to advocate for them, give them a safe place to go. And, you know, so they're not always put into situations they're not ready for. So a relaxed kitty, the pupils look normal. There's the normal slitty pupils. The whiskers are in a neutral position. The ears are like forward. And the body, we actually, you know, the body is good to look at. You can't really see it in this picture, but the body generally should be, you know, there should be a little curve in the spine. And that's the same with dogs. Okay, so I like this in here. So we're gonna talk a little bit about dogs and then we'll give some examples of cats after. So with dogs, some signs are obvious. We all know like the growly, angry dog with those teeth bared, the lip curled, that furrowed brow you can see on that Jack Russell in the top, on the top left. His ears are kind of back and you can see how stiff his body is too. And the whites of the eyes are showing. So that's the whale eye I was talking about there. And then the little Chihuahua, it can be harder to tell with flatter faced dogs. So the Chihuahua on the bottom left there, because their faces, yeah, it can be a little harder to read because they're a bit shorter, but you can see how wrinkled that face is. The brows are forward, the ears are pinned back, and his head is turned too. And they'll do that head turn because they're like, hey, I'm giving you my ugly, angry face, but I don't want to bite you unless I absolutely have to. So it's kind of like an avoidance behavior. Now, I wanted to include this cute guy on the right. I guess I gave it away. But you know, it's a little test. Is this an aggressive dog? Yes or no? I would say no. What's the difference? How can you tell? Because you don't want to just go by the teeth, you know, the teeth showing in that bitey face. But look at his eyes, look at his brow, look at his ears. Can you see a furrowed brow? No, not so much. His forehead's nice and smooth. The eyes are fairly relaxed. And the ears are slightly forward and neutral. So my guess would be that this guy's just playing, and he's playing a cute game of Bitey Wolf. Okay, so I have some photos too from classmates in some of my behavior courses and clients of mine. So I got them to submit some pictures of their own dogs. So this is an interesting picture. There's nothing crazy or dramatic happening here, but look at the nose to tail. And you kind of want to, you know, you don't want to just make your assumptions off of one body language sign. You kind of want to add them all up and see what story that tells you. So nose to tail, what do you see? So with the nose, the mouth is closed and kind of tight. We got some squinty eyes going on there. And the tongue flick is probably the most noticeable thing to me. And so the tongue flick can be a sign, like a distance increasing behavior. Like, I don't want you to come any closer. You'll actually see dogs do that to babies. And sadly, people will confuse that as kisses, but really it's like, I kind of want you to go away behavior. The ears actually aren't too bad in this. But he does have that head turn, kind of an avoidance displacement behavior going on. The spine is stiff and the tail, it's not tucked, but it's not a happy loose tail either. So if I were to guess, you know, observation is your most important thing. You want to kind of think about what you see and then interpret the behavior based on, you know, the dog that you know and what's going on in the environment, and kind of come up with a conclusion from there. If I were to guess, not knowing this dog or the whole situation, he might just be a little conflicted with the situation and a little bit uncomfortable and being like, I don't know. I don't really want to approach whatever that is. I kind of want to get out of the situation. So those are the little micro signals that I highly recommend watching out for when you bring your dog to a new place. Sleepy, relaxed. So this is a photo submitted by another classmate of mine. They actually told me what was going on in this picture. So the picture on the left, you can see the biggest thing I notice are the whites of the eyes showing. They're kind of, you know, the eyes are turned more to the side, so you see more of the whites, the whale eyes, or some people call it the half moon eye. And then the mouth, we've got a little pant going on. And now panting, dogs can pant for so many different reasons. But again, we've got to add up the clues and kind of make our conclusion from that. And then we've got the yawn as well on the bottom right. So the stress yawn is what that's known as. So you might notice that, yeah, dogs will yawn when they're tired, but they might yawn more when they're feeling uncomfortable in a situation. So in this situation, the person told me that, yeah, the dog was at like a family get together and was showing all of these signs. So what they decided to do was just take her to another room for some quiet time and give her like a stuffed Kong with peanut butter and give her a little break. And if that's something you're going to be doing when you're traveling, is visiting people and friends, and your dog's going to be in a new environment, keep that in mind. This is my client, Quinn B. She's actually I've been working with her for, gosh, like a year and a half now, since she was a puppy. And the first picture on the left is her when she got introduced to her new daycare, like boarding facility where she goes once in a while. And actually the person who owns that place is amazing and knows a lot about behavior, although I wouldn't normally recommend if you have such a fearful dog. So you can see on the left there how she's hiding under her bed and her body is low. It's not a very good picture, but it was from a video and I took a little screenshot and I wanted to save that for examples. So as she's being pet there, you can see there's a little tongue flick and you can really see the whites of her eyes. And of course, she's trying to like get out of the situation. So to have someone pet an animal that's in that kind of mental state, not always the best idea, because that's how dogs learn. Okay, giving these initial signals isn't communicating I'm uncomfortable. I may have to take the next step and do the growly, bitey, lungy thing, which is what none of us want. And then on the right, Quinn as an adult, this is during a thunderstorm. So you can see those, she already has amazing eyebrows, but her eyebrows are really furrowed there. Her mouth is shut and her lips are kind of pulled back a little bit. Some dogs do that when they're being sooky and they want attention, but again, we're adding up the different clues and making our conclusion. Her ears are pinned back and her body is quite stiff. I believe she was like shedding a lot there too, and shedding can be another sign of stress, excessive shedding, and she's hiding in the corner. So Quinn's actually doing a lot better now, but she's one of those dogs where she doesn't have like all of her needs met to feel safe all the time. She can be very quickly startled and afraid and reactive to changes in the environment. She's a sensitive girl. So context matters, like I keep repeating. I really wanted to use this picture because I just want you to think for a minute, like, what do you think is going on in this picture? Maybe if you know certain breeds of dogs, you may kind of have like an idea what could be going on. Being a herding breed, you know that these kinds of dogs can be very, very intense by nature and very controlling. But look at his lips and look at how they're like pushed forward, and you can see how tense he is, and that spine is straight and he's got those really focused eyes. So if you were to initially to see that, some of us might be like, oh my God, scary dog. But actually his owner told me that he was just playing in the water and he was really, really upset because he couldn't control the waves. And if any of you know like border collies and Australian shepherds and even German shepherds, dogs like that, they love to have control in their situation. They're kind of like, little drill sergeants. So so he's just really overstimulated because of the waves in the water. So he's not angry per se, but he's angry at the water and even, playful overstimulation. Not a bad thing, but it's just something to be aware of, that maybe your dog needs a little chill out time. Okay, so kitties. So yeah, ears, whiskers, pupils, body position, spine. So what do we see here? On the top left here, that's kind of a scene you might see a lot in veterinary hospitals, unfortunately. If you've got a kitty like feeling sick and they're in an unfamiliar place with weird smells, look at the pupils of this kitty. They are humongous. And he's got the flattened ears, and he's just trying to make himself as small as possible. And you can just tell those muscles are just like so stiff. So yeah, that's not a happy kitty at all. So you want to keep in mind, like if you see a cat like that, like they're either going to fight, flight, or freeze if you were to approach them or bother them or get in their space. A kitty on the bottom left, body moving away. I mean, avoidance. If an animal's ever leaning away from you when you try to reach out to them, take that as a sign they don't want to be touched. So if your animal's behaving that way, it may be a good opportunity to step in and get them out of an uncomfortable situation. It's tough to tell. His tail might be a little puffed up there. It's difficult to say. Ears flattened. He's even got a little tongue flick going on there, and also dilated pupils. The kitty on the bottom right, he's actually a really good travel cat, and he's going to be in the next few pictures, but he did see a dog there and he was hissing, so that's a pretty obvious sign. Another example of how context matters, the kitty on the right, so he's got he looks really tense. His ears, he is under a blanket or something, but his ears were probably flattened and he's got those giant pupils. But I'm curious if that's actually being an aggressive or afraid cat. I'm curious if he's actually just overstimulated and he's playing under the blankets and just getting really hyper like some cats do on catnip. So again, not a bad thing, but that's also good to be aware of, because a cat like that, it's a fine line between play and aggression. So if they get overstimulated and someone were to reach for your cat, they could be more likely to swat them. So just like puppies, start kitties young, but keep realistic expectations. They're all individuals and might surprise you. Some say that cats are the new dog. I'm starting to see more and more cats out there that people are taking with them on walks or adventures. Usually cats prefer not to be walked on leash, but at the very least get them comfortable wearing a harness so they don't want to back out of it. And you can do that a similar way as you would carrier training, is pairing it with treats, teaching them putting their head through the harness means good things, and just short gradual intervals of wearing a harness. These cat space cadet backpacks are super trendy right now, and I think they're amazing. This is my friend Kendra's cat Larry. She runs she's a veterinary technician, and she runs pet services in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And her cat Larry, he's a pretty cool dude, and she takes him to the park and all kinds of places, and he'll wear his harness and he'll go hitch a ride in her backpack. And I think she started him quite young. So I think it's misunderstood. People think that dogs are the ultimate companion animal, and yes, they are more so bred to be a companion animal specifically. But if you start cats young and socialize them young, you can do a lot of these things with them. So don't underestimate your cat, but also if your cat is just really not into it, don't force it either. So yeah, and it's becoming more of a thing to cat socialization, kitten socialization classes, just like puppy socialization classes. So it's a thing now, and I think it's fantastic. All right, so mental well-being, super, super important. Just because you can take you want to take your animal somewhere, it's important to ask yourself, is this what they want, or is this something that you want? So you really want to consider their needs in the situation. Don't try to force something that's just not meant to be. But if it's something you want when you have a young animal where their brain is still developing, start their training and exposure early, but try to keep those exposures, in socialization positive. And if it's stressful, know that they can recover afterwards from the stressful situation, so that they know how to overcome those stressful experiences rather than throwing them headfirst or in the deep end of the water. Always provide your animals safe spaces and rest opportunities. Do they have the ability to escape a scary situation if they need to? Is there a quiet room they can go to, or a crate, or somewhere up high for a kitty? you know, again, advocate for your animal. If you plan on traveling with them, know that you're doing it with them and they're not just there tagging along, following you around. You want them to, you know, feel like you have their back at all times. And rest, I don't just mean like taking breaks, like, is your animal getting enough sleep? Because sleep is so important for resilience levels and the ability to overcome stress, in our case as well. So is your animal getting enough sleep, sorry. Cats, as we know, require a lot of sleep. So keep in mind, if you're doing a lot of things with your cat, it's natural for cats to sleep all day. So if they're getting less of that, you know, maybe they're enjoying themselves traveling, but they could get burnt out very quickly if you're not giving them the opportunity to sleep. And with dogs, on average, dogs require about 16 hours of sleep a day. So less than cats, but more than humans. So sometimes if you need to, enforce those naps with your dog to give them a chance to rest and recover. If you have to travel somewhere with your animal, and you know that they may struggle with it, whether it's like motion sickness or just stress and anxiety, talk to your veterinarian about travel and anxiety medications, or anti-nausea medications, because, you know, they can be a lifesaver and they can prevent your animal from, you know, becoming traumatized by something in the long run. So, you know, we don't always love to see our animals sedated in situations, but sometimes it can really save a lot of pain later down the road and they'll be thankful for it. Just keep in mind, if you are going to fly your animal, it's actually quite risky to sedate your animal while flying. There are exceptions and some people do it, but there is higher risk of things going wrong and like breathing issues and stuff like that, or issues with their heart if they are on like sedatives and go at a high altitude. And yeah, just remember, just because they can doesn't mean they should. Not all pets are suited for travel. It's okay to get a sitter. So always have a backup plan, someone you know and trust who can take care of your animal if you need to, when you go to travel. Yeah, or, you know, if something were to happen, an emergency contact or something like that. If your pet's staying with you or staying with someone else, make sure that you have options. And if you plan to leave your pet at a kennel or a cattery or something like that, get to know the business first, meet the owner, get a tour, ask yourself, is this a place where my animal wants to spend a few days or a week or a couple weeks there? Are they going to come home, you know, smelling like urine and stress and losing their hair? And, you know, we don't want that. We want your animal to go somewhere where they know that they're going to be safe. So do your research first before you leave to travel anywhere, if you plan on leaving your animal. This is a picture of Bubs in Switzerland. It's a very, you know, Instagram-y photo, but that's really what it looked like there. It was absolutely amazing. And I wouldn't advise it, but yeah, he doesn't even have his collar on there because there was just so much space and we could see for miles, and he was old and he didn't move much at that point. All right, there we go, guys. So please let me know if you have any questions, and my website is written at the bottom there if you want to learn more about me or reach out to me about anything.
So I just wanted to open it up there if anyone has any questions or any stories they wanted to share about traveling with their pets. There's an opportunity for that now. Well, I'll share with you while we're waiting to see if anyone else wants to say anything. But we did take our cats, like I had told you previously before we started, that we had adopted them in Italy, and they were wild cats that we rescued from our backyard, and they were about just over a year old when we took them on their first plane ride, which was rather stressful for us to fly from Italy when we were posted there coming here. And we definitely had spoken to the vet ahead of time because they had never really traveled in carriers beyond going to the veterinary office. And so, you know, we tried to get them used to it, did all of those things, and they did fairly well, but we did notice definitely those stress signs of them panting, you know, going very low down, just like you were showing there. And then my one cat, who's usually the less vocal one, was doing a lot of meowing on and off, thankfully with a short flight. But yeah, we did notice a lot of those things, but the airline was really good. The only part that we found We had spoken to the vet ahead of time in Italy, and they said when you go through security, they'll take you to another room if they need to take the cat out. They won't take them out just in public. And then when we were going through security, they said, no, you need to take the cat out right here. And we had told them, I said, oh my gosh, like my cat is going to scratch and be very scared. And it was just right in the middle with everybody at security. And they told us, unfortunately, there's no room and you absolutely have to take the cat out here. So it was pretty stressful for the cat, and we were quite worried about it because obviously if they escape in the airport, there's no getting them back. But they were really good. But actually the cat, when we took it out, completely froze, and we've never seen our cats do that before. So we did one at a time. They just froze, and my husband held on to them. They put the carrier through the security check and then put them back in. So I guess just something to keep in mind is sometimes there's not a room available, and if you have a cat and you're going on a flight, they may actually make you just take it out right there.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's so important. If you're taking them out of your car, like even stopping at, if you're driving and you're stopping at a gas station or something like that, and there's high traffic near you, be aware that you've got like that leash clipped on, the harness on. Because you never know what's going to happen. And just loud noises can make your animal behave in a way you never knew they would. They could freeze, or they could, Europeans love fire. Well, Belgians love fireworks. Like we have fireworks all the time. So like, know how to prepare for things like that as well, so your animal doesn't run away and get lost.
Definitely. Catherine, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm Catherine. We are in London. It's not totally related to travel, but and I know you said that you're most specialist in canine behavior. Sorry, but I have a question in a way. What does that mean when your cat licks you? Because our cat licks us a lot on the cheeks, the ears, the hand, and of course as a human we project that it's a affectionate behavior, but I'm not sure about that. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you know it, I would appreciate to have the answer.
No, that's a great question. So I can mention a few things to consider for sure. And I mean, looking at your cat's history is important too. Like, is this a brand new behavior? No, okay.
No, he does it a lot. When we hold him, he licks us, and it's really a licky boy.
Okay. I mean, no matter what with any animal, like when I see clients for behavior issues, I always want to rule out health issues first. And, like not just check from the vet, but, blood work's good too. But if it's both of your cats, then that might indicate it's not health related if they're both doing it. I mean, cats are like dogs, like they like to lick to explore their world. They can be licking for affection, but often excessive licking with any animal sometimes can be stress related. So you want to consider, like, have you changed environments lately? Like, have you moved or have you rearranged the house? But I mean, if it's been going on for a while, maybe not. The other thing is cats do like to lick if you wear certain like aftershave face creams. Cats really love mint flavored things, and actually mint and catnip are in the same family. So if you ever wear like mint essential oil, or even like muscle, like rub A535 or whatever it's called, they can really be obsessed with that as well. I don't know how much data there is on it or studies, but there's basically like the wives' tale that your cat can sense if you're ill as well, or if you have something, but there is no scientific proof behind that, but there's a lot of anecdotal stories behind it. So not to freak you out, but I wanted to add that to the list too. I think the first thing I would consider is there something I can do? Like if it is stress related, like, is there something that, do they have other behaviors that are stress related, or things that bother them? Are they sensitive cats? So that's
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's great. Thank you, Catherine. And then Debbie has a question that she's put in the chat. And it says, I understand traveling with versus having your pets be baggage. Could families consider using a pet hotel in a city that they are visiting to allow for a museum or other attraction that wouldn't allow animals? So do you have any experience that you could share with us on using pet hotels in the city of your destination?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So there is an app I mentioned called Bring Fido. And so you can look up pet friendly like hotels and things like that wherever you're going. But also like Airbnb and booking.com tell you if certain like hotels are pet friendly. We've had very little issue traveling with our dog finding pet friendly accommodations, especially Airbnbs. And we've actually, well, that's the other thing you want to consider, like if your animal has like separation anxiety or something like that, are you comfortable leaving them in a hotel while you're out? And if you're going to do that, just let the hotel staff know and make sure your place is secure, and that they can contact you if something were to go wrong. We have certainly done that, but just make sure your animal is comfortable doing that. They're not going to tear up the place or something. Is that kind of what you were asking about? Yes, no?
Oh, we can't hear you, Debbie. I think your mic might be turned off.
Yeah, let me know if there's anything I left out there, or if there's something you wanted me to add, or if you need clarification on something.
She said by pet hotel, she meant a drop-off minding service.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm not sure. I'm sure there are places. I actually know that when we went to Disney in Paris, they had like a pet hotel situation there. So they do exist. And they'd probably be like, some of them would be like regular boarding facilities too. Like if you wanted to drop them off like at a dog daycare or like something like that, or a cat hotel. Yeah, so then I would just do your research ahead of time and make sure that you're comfortable leaving your animal there, because I know in Canada it's a very unregulated industry, and I know places here it's very unregulated. So really the pet industry as a whole is very unregulated. So you can't trust everyone, sadly, with your pets, not to be, dark about it, but you've got to make the decision for yourself. And just because someone says they have this many years of experience with animals doesn't necessarily mean they do the best by your animals. So, some of it is, it's just about money, and they throw your animals in a room together and like a mosh pit, and that's not the best way to go about it. So yeah, definitely do your research on it.
So thank you to all the participants that came. Thank you for giving us your time today. We will be sending out a link to the YouTube video after it's edited, and it will be posted on the YouTube channel. And a big thank you to Hilary. Thank you so much for all the information you shared, for the photos, the videos. It's been extremely helpful, and we really, really appreciate that. I know there's a lot of families who are here in Europe or in Canada who travel with their animals. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me, and let me know if there are any topics that you guys would like to hear about, and I will talk about it. I'm happy to.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful day. Bonne journée tout le monde.